Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and this is episode 493. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing?
I wish I came up with a caption as good as you. But it's a sunny 70-degree day in Seattle, so not much to complain about. And it's great for Seattle because a certain team that got stolen from them lost yesterday as well. So,
good point.
And another team on the other end of I-90, I think, lost, but
yes,
I can't be too sure.
I-95.
No, I-90. These are the two ends. Fun fact. I-90 is the only interstate with a baseball stadium on both ends, and they're both named after a baseball player. If you can guess the players, I feel like Jeff can. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to bury the lead.
What are the cities? Seattle?
Not off the top of my head. I could probably, I know most of the stadium names, so but definitely
Seattle
not. I don't know
Boston.
that fun fact.
Oh, wow.
So Fenway and,
I definitely did not know that Fenway was named after a player. That's interesting.
I did not know I-90
No.
Seattle to Boston.
No. It's the drives that they end in. So Edgar Martinez Drive here, and it's Ted Williams Drive.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, I was like, who the hell is Fenway?
Yeah, I had no idea who the fuck.
Now I kind of want to know what was Fenway named after. But go ahead.
And we are joined by not a first-time guest of the pod, but first time in a little while. His name is Jeff. That is at Frank Barrett 119 on Twitter. You can follow him on there. And he is the co-founder of the Hot Hand Theory. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always so impressive to me to hear you list the episode counts. As someone who's trying to do his own thing, you guys have made almost 10 times as many episodes as we had. It feels like we've done so many. We've just done nothing. It's crazy. I do have to swing this back to you, Shwin. I was just stumbling across the old Twitter, and you know how that hellscape can be. Sometimes random things will just pop up. And somehow an old tweet of yours popped up where you were like, my 10 least favorite players, and 4 of them are Knicks now.
Yes.
That's so impressive to me that you've just been all right, fuck that, I was wrong. Let's root for them now. Let's turn it around.
What if I was it was like a reverse jinx? I've always wanted these players secretly. I always wanted a Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby.
Is that something you might be interested in?
I don't know who the fourth one is. Is it Campaign or something?
Precious, probably.
Man.
No, there's no way I hated Precious that much.
Yeah, it wasn't Precious. It could have just been 3. I could have just been exaggerating.
I think it was 3.
I just remember it was a part of your anti Kevin Durant campaign. I think he was number 1. So that means the Knicks. That just means all the rumors of this series ending poorly and the Knicks getting Durant this summer are going to come to fruition.
Inevitable. Yeah, it's inevitable. We'll be trading Mitchell Robinson and Deuce and Josh Hart, 3 guys I like, to get Kevin Durant, a player I absolutely love. That would make sense. All right. We're not here to talk about Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant's not playing in the playoffs because he's a gigantic loser. We're going to talk about the Knicks. But before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First, Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are, and you've not done so already, please hit subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.strict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I serve Friday the Prez. You also get access to Takes My His Bozos podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about things even more. You also get access to one of our premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. And you get access to Strickland NFL, which you guessed it is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Constantine Metricos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on our product recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this. Actually, no, we don't have to do anything else. All right, that's it. None of this will be possible without everybody that's listening. All right, we're going to talk about the Knicks. The Knicks won a basketball game. They won game 1 in Boston, 108-105. They were down 20 at one point in the second half, 52-72. And they stormed back to win this in overtime in fairly dramatic fashion. I have some thoughts. I want to get your guys' thoughts on my thoughts. I want to start with Tom Thibodeau. I think he deserves a lot of credit for how this game went. I think this is more or less, he basically checked off everything I've wanted to see from him this season and was skeptical I would. So kudos to Tom Thibodeau for unleashing the beast in game one of this series. He's slow. One of the thoughts I had was, one, do we think that he intentionally was like holding a lot of this stuff back for the postseason in terms of switching more, hard hedging, sending traps, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we don't need to list everything that, you know, we can go through, but, you know, using varied lineups. I think that was something that was very, very surprising yesterday. And I know, look, some of it was about guys got into foul trouble, so he had to go to that. But you know, I thought some of it was intentional. Like, he pulled Brunson pretty early in the first quarter, which I think was intended to buy him rest when Pritchard was in the game. And they took out, I believe it was Drew at that point that went out for him. Might have been Derek White. I don't know, remember which one. But that was, I thought, an interesting thing. He went to campaign early to get Brunson some rest early in the game. That was an interesting wrinkle. This is the second time now in the playoffs that when he's had foul trouble with his bigs, he's gone to OG at the 5. He did that again. It didn't work fantastically in either instance, but I think it's pretty cool that Tom Thibodeau, of all coaches in the NBA, is like, when my two bigs that I trust get in trouble, I will not just throw like another big immediately on the floor. I will try something different. I think he deserves a ton of credit for that.
40?
Yes. No, I think it would have been fucking insane for him to throw Huck Porty onto the floor, just considering everything. Like, that would have been like, maybe if he had played him more in the regular season, which is a separate conversation, I would have been like, why don't you go to Huck Porty there? He didn't. I think it would be wrong to put a rookie in that situation on the road in that moment of the game, especially considering they were intentionally fouling, and he's a bad free throw shooter. It would have been absolutely bonkers to do that. So, yeah, I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. And yeah, so I guess my broad thought, and, you know, I want to have a bit of a conversation here about Thibs beyond this, but I do want to start with this, is, you know, I'll throw this to you, Jeff, because I think you've been pretty vocal. I think me and you have echoed a lot of the same criticisms of Tom Thibodeau's choices at various points in his career, but certainly this year, more so than any other year, I think. You know, what did you make of this game? And I guess, do you think that maybe he was like kind of slow rolling this the entire year and kind of didn't want to put it on tape or whatever you want to say, and just kind of unleash this at the right moment in time?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because my intuition would still be pretty strongly that getting reps of these sorts of coverages would probably have more value than the surprise factor of it. So, like, even if that was his logic, he could be right. That could be right, and it certainly showed its strengths last night. But I would still lean pretty heavily towards the idea that you want these guys to, for long-term benefits and the short-term benefits of maybe being a better regular season team, having more wider variety of coverages, performing better in those games, because you're not just doing one thing over and over again. You're not as predictable. But also, I think you might be better prepared for a game one like last night, where it's going to call for heavy switching and heavy hedging, and you have to do it all the time. You know, I'm not, we talked about this before we hopped on. I'm not here to say like, oh, the Knicks were so lucky, all variants, they won. This is not what I'm saying at all. But I do think that, like, the conversation about how successful what occurred would maybe be a little different if, like, the Celtics hit 3 more threes, you know? So I think we have to be we have to put the foot on the brakes a little bit with,
it was results based instead of process.
Right. It was just wildly successful because they won this game. They deserved to win this game. And Thibodeau did a lot of great things. I specifically loved the increased pace in the half court. I thought that was a huge change. I loved that when they got down 20, they effectively changed their strategy. I don't know if you guys know this. They shot 11 threes in the 10 plus minutes to go from down 20 to tied. In that stretch, they basically completely flipped the script on what their normal offense is. They played faster, they pushed off misses, and they sought threes. I thought that was a brilliant strategy, a brilliant awareness of the game situation. And yeah, I mean, I just think the big thing was the big concern headed into the game was, okay, they can switch everything, but eventually Tatum's just going to get by Towns. And is Tom Thibodeau going to be able to live with the aesthetics of an easy layup, an easy dunk? You know that drives him nuts. And I thought the Knicks did a pretty good job of walling off at the nail and making that harder for the Celtics while not completely just giving up threes and abandoning their guy. But I also thought Thibs really, really remained committed to the system in the face of some not so great results in the first 2.5 quarters. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, because I wouldn't have assumed that he would be willing to do that even for a game.
Well, to the point you're making about sticking with things, even in the face of like not great results immediately. In our Discord, during the game, like there were people in the first half when it was a pretty close game, it was like a 2-point game or whatever at that point, where people were like, they got to stop switching stuff with Mitch. He's getting burned. This is a disaster. Like, and like I understood it kind of just watching the game. I'm like, I get what your point is, but I'm also like, I'd rather them do this than give up a bunch of threes because you're in drop and then your rotations aren't on a string and whatnot. And like, it just requires so much to go right as a system. And that's what that got them into trouble, especially in the first, the opening, the season opener. We don't need to relive that. We all saw what that was. And then
what they were doing.
Yeah, they didn't know what they're doing. They did not match the necessary effort. Boston came out and was like ready to fucking just like send a message on the opening day of the season, whatever. The second and third games of the season were also not particularly great. I thought the last time they matched up against Boston, was it perfect? No, but I thought there were a lot of encouraging signs in that game. And again, not that any single game comes down to one single set of things, but I thought in large part it was like, yeah, if you just clean up like whatever the fuck you were doing with Porzingis, you probably win that game. And Porzingis was a non-factor yesterday, and to be honest, like they probably benefited from him leaving the game because he's been fucking awful in these playoffs for the most part, and he was terrible yesterday when he was on the floor.
I mean, Knicks double agent waiting for this moment to...
Maybe because the first time they threw him the ball, he immediately just starts screaming that Josh Hart's hooking his arm and like lets the ball go out of bounds. I was like, I don't know, dude, you're 7'3", maybe like catch.
You know what Hart rhymes with? It rhymes with smart. That was the guy who always used to fucking kill us with KP.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Akshay brought it up on Hot Hand Theory in our live pregame show before Game 1. On this season, over a pretty meaningful sample, the Celtics are like plus 18 per 100 with the starting five in Horford's and Porzingis' spot. Yep. They're a below 50th percentile lineup with Porzingis and the starters, and that lineup just destroyed the league last year. That was the best lineup in the NBA last season.
Maybe he's too tall for a game. He's Sean Bradley.
Across like 700 possessions this year, they were like a below average lineup. They were worse than the Knicks starting lineup, which I think we correctly have scrutinized all season. Before we swing it over to Stacy, I just want to say one last thing about this switch heavy thing. We've seen a lot of credit being tossed around correctly to Thibs, to Bridges, to Hart, to OG. There's one guy I think hasn't been talked about at all. And I think that when we talk about Tom Thibodeau's willingness to live with the system, this guy's ability to hold up is probably the most important, because if he gets exposed, I think that's the sort of thing where Thibs is like, I have to protect this player. I can't get burned. I thought Jalen Brunson was magnificent defensively yesterday in these switches. I thought against bigger guys, against faster guys, he didn't win every time, but I don't think there was a single time where he like got embarrassed or it was like, oh man, this guy can't defend. I thought he completely held his own. And when you're asked to carry the burden that Jalen Brunson is offensively, to hold up that way defensively is extremely impressive. And I just don't think anybody's talking about it. So I wanted to give a shout out to him. I thought that was an amazing performance.
I think he's been great in these games against Boston all season. When he gets posted up, he fights to get over. You hear, I'm not trying to call out anyone for anti-Knicks bias, because I think it's a very fair concern. This is exactly how I would judge the Knicks from a distance. A lot of people are like, you have two awful defenders in your starting lineup. And it's like, they talk about Brunson like he's Trae Young, and it's like, no, one, he's pretty strong. And two, he has good instincts. The charge thing is if you're actually going to call Brunson a flopper, by the way, it pertains more on defense than on offense, but he will fight for position. He makes it very difficult to throw entry passes. So I completely agree with that. And I think that is kind of the margin, right? If you're going to win with a 6'1" player, which that, this whole 1A conversation, that's really what it comes down to, right? Is the 6'1" thing. Because I don't think the offensive talent can be questioned at this point. It's really, it's the defense, like a guy who can be exploited. Those are the margins that he is fighting to win. Will that be enough? I don't know, but that could be enough. And that is something it might not be sufficient, but it's very necessary. I do want to go back to what Shwin was saying about, the optics versus kind of how it actually plays out. I remember this when Tatum, there was one game, I think it was the third game, where he was just getting wherever, like he was getting Bridges into the post. He was ISOing Bridges. Cat was on the floor. They weren't even running pick and roll with Cat. They were saying, we're going to ISO Bridges with Tatum. And he was hitting these mid-range fadeaways. Some of them were insane. He's hitting these crazy pull-ups. And, but I was like, but if Boston is doing that instead of spraying the ball all over the floor, like making us get into constant rotations, I will live with that. Like, it might still be really good, and that's just how good they are, and how good Tatum has become, by the way. Before this season, I would have said the Knicks had the best player, at least in this series. Last night maybe changes that a little bit, but I think Tatum is the best player in the series still. And not just because he's better on defense. He's a legitimate.
He's got the best. I'll tell you one thing. He's got the best stiff arm in the series. No question about that.
Best stiff arm in Boston since what? Curtis Martin, maybe.
I don't know if you guys agree. I don't know if you guys agree with this. I agree with Stacy. I think Tatum. I would give Tatum the slight edge over Brunson in terms of just overall impact. And I thought that the Knicks, specifically when Tatum was in the pick and roll, did a really good job of pre-switching when they tried to hunt Brunson. They were really, really adept there. Boston was seeking him, and the Knicks were really, really crossing their T's in terms of making sure that Brunson would switch on to somebody else and Mikal would take it or whatever. But it just totally went off. I'm almost more afraid of Derek White than anybody else on their team. Like that guy, that guy, I think is like the guy who can really make this series not unwinnable, but just like down the stretch, they kept like having him be the inbounder when they needed a shot, and like he's their best deep 3-point shooter. He's their best like everything basically.
He's their best tight contest 3-point shooter also.
He's what we wish Josh Hart would be in like a.
Well, to the point.
Somebody made a brilliant comparison in the comments of Hot Hand Theory. They said he's a he's a hybrid between Dante and Josh Hart, which is like terrifying and actually really accurate. He's like those two with rim protection, which is an insane basketball player.
And I think like to the point you're making, like the way I think of it is, if the Knicks are at their best and Boston is at their best, Boston is still like they're a bit above. And a lot of that just has to do with like, because I think their depth is more fleshed out. And look, we'll see. Their depth is going to be challenged. The Hauser thing did not look great. I would not be surprised if he misses extended time here. Porzingis has had like, I don't know what this illness he's had now is for like months, but it's just been lingering forever. And as you mentioned earlier, like he's just been less.
He's anemic too, right?
Yeah. Right. So I don't know what's going on.
Not a doctor. My parents remind me every day, but
right. And as you said earlier, Jeff, like he's just flat out not been as impactful this year. Jaylen Brown looks more limited. Drew is still good, but I think you saw some of the stuff with him this year where you're like, okay, age might kind of be showing some slippage with him here. Horford yesterday, like, there are games where he looks completely fine. And then you're going to watch a game like last night where you're like, yeah, this guy looks like he's 38. Thank God. Finally, it's happening. But their depth is still a little bit above. But I think the comparison you made of Josh Hart and Derek White is kind of interesting, because I've talked to both of you guys about this before, but like I always think that there's something about Josh Hart where when he is going good, like he gives you a level, like he raises the level of the team in a way I don't think anybody else quite can.
And it's often unsung. I mean, Cat had a great putback yesterday. It was Hart who stripped the ball from, I don't know I think it was Horford.
Yeah,
it's those kind of things that you don't show up in the box score.
And it's not to say like he's more impactful than Jalen Brunson or Mitchell Robinson or OG Anunoby or whatever.
He's an inflection point in many ways.
Yeah, I think
what you're going to get from those guys.
Right. I think he almost like he gives you edges and he wins margins that like you're not going to win with other guys. or maybe not even. He wins things in ways that you're not going to win with other guys. And I just think when he's going good, he adds a dynamism to the group that they just don't have. Like the way he pushes pace, like his ability to get these contested rebounds. Like one of the threes that Brunson hit yesterday was a sequence where Hart got 2 offensive rebounds and then sprayed it out to Brunson on the second one for a wide open 3 from the kind of the corner. And like, those are just plays that I don't know. Like, I guess Mitchell Robinson can make those plays. I'm not sure that Mitch would catch the ball cleanly and then immediately find a shooter. Might take him a good full second to kind of.
And he has to avoid getting fouled in the same.
Yeah, avoid getting fouled. Thank you, Joe Mazzulla, for making the first half of this game one of the most miserable watches of my life. But like, Derek White is kind of that for Boston, where it's like, yeah, you know what you're gonna get from Tatum. Generally, you know what you're going to get from Brown. You know what you're going to get from these guys. There's something about Derek White when he's going good, you feel like, oh shit, like this is this level they're hitting now. Nobody else on this team can provide it. And kind of what you mentioned, Jeff, like he's a deep 3-point shooter. He's also a tight contest 3-point shooter. He gives you this level of ball handling that, like, honestly, aside from Tatum in that lineup, I don't think anybody really provides a level of ball handling Derek White can. His rim protection is phenomenal.
Not true.
Not anymore. No, absolutely not. And like the rim protection stuff with him is obviously elite. It's not even, and forget the rim protection. Like he's the same size as Josh Hart. He can basically like switch 1 to 4 and 1 to 5 in a pinch. Like he's really, really unique. So, and it's nothing is more annoying in the entire fucking world than this guy getting traded to Boston. And then as soon as he gets to Boston, it's like, oh, guys, guess what? I figured out how to shoot threes now. Everything is great. But
I've been saying exactly that for 3 years. Like, why the fuck did this happen? They got him for free, and then he was like, "Oh, by the way, guys, I can shoot 43% from 3, and I'm like I'm one of the 30 best players in the league." It's
ridiculous.
So you know.
It's fucking ridiculous. But like, yeah, I do think there is a level there. To get back to the Thibodeau thing, just because I did want to talk about this a little bit more. Look, we'll see how the series works out. And what I would say is this. To me, the game itself yesterday, like the result is obviously great. Obviously, the Knicks win. That's great. If he coached that way and they lost, like I would have been okay with that, because I would have been like, I think he did most of everything that you could reasonably expect him to do. I thought he reacted pretty quickly, actually, to the stuff that Mazzulla was doing in the first half in terms of intentionally fouling Mitch. And he tried different things, right? He tried OG at the 5. Then he's like, okay, this isn't maybe working that well. Let me try Precious. And yeah, is that a great option? No, but those are the options he has. So you have to kind of respect that. And I guess like what I would ask, and look, there's going to be hopefully there's only 3 more games in the series. The Knicks win all of them. But like we'll see however many more games there are in this series. I'll throw this to you, Stacy, and Jeff, feel free to jump in whenever. Like, let's just say the process of this stuff stays the same, broadly speaking, right? His willingness to stick with switching more, and the Knicks themselves as a team looking more prepared and willing and able to execute at a higher level than I think they've shown in a lot of the season. Like, would that for you be like, okay, you know what? Like, I didn't love a lot of what Thibs did this year, and quite frankly, don't really think that what he did in the regular season was a particularly great, job of like amazing coaching or something. But if he's capable of this, then yeah, I'm comfortable bringing him back. Because that's kind of what I was thinking about during the game yesterday, where I'm like, okay, look, like I don't need to agree with everything he's done. And Jeff, you actually talked about this. I don't remember. It might have been before the Pistons series, where you were like, look, I don't need to agree with him, but like, you're like, I could kind of like respect like the conviction he's shown in what he believes to be true. Because to me, like, look, I think he deserves actually some credit for that conviction. Like, we can sit here and talk about the starting 5 net rating. Well, you know what? That starting 5 in a couple of big games here back to back has turned up, and they've managed to show up in big time games, big time situations. Like, I can't say that that's all because of Thibs is playing them, fucking 900 minutes or whatever the hell it was in the regular season. But like ultimately, this season I think was always going to be judged at this point when you play a Boston, when you play a contender level team. And if this is what you're getting from Thibs, I guess when you play that contender level team, are you more comfortable now with the idea of like, okay, well, you bring him back, maybe he deserves that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I think the frustrations we had were because of how it would look against Boston. That was how this team was going to be judged. Not even Oklahoma City or Cleveland to the same extent. We didn't know Cleveland was going to be this. And so all of the consternation we had, like the results were not terrible. They got 51 wins. That's, basically what you would expected. So yeah, I'm aligned with that. I think it was a lot more fun to watch game one of this series than game one against the Pistons, because game one was like, we have everything to lose. I made this comp in my group chat, and it was with a bunch of people from the Detroit area, and they didn't like it. But I said, this feels like no upside playing Detroit. If we win, we were supposed to. If we lose, it's like losing to Appalachian State. And this was much more fun because I was like, I'm going to go into this game expecting a loss. I want to see what Thibs does. That's what we're going to judge this on, and what it should be going forward. And if the front office doesn't agree, then they're kind of tying themselves to it, and there's nothing to defend there. I think he showed what you wanted, right? He was flexible. He just goes to things. In machine learning, there's this thing called the exploration versus exploitation trade-off. So if you go to a casino, this is the example it's always used, right? There's 100 slot machines. Some have better luck than others. You can keep trying one, or if you find one that works once, you keep trying that. Or you can explore more and try a bunch of different slot machines until you find one that works, right? And if you try too many, you're never going to exploit and get any benefit. But if you try the same one, you don't know what else you can have, right? And Thibs is very much an exploitation guy. He sees practice. He knows he has a wealth of experience, more than, he's forgotten more, I'll say, than any of us about basketball. But I think when he gets backed into a corner, and I think that's probably what it felt like after just getting the shit kicked out of them by Boston so many times, that, okay, it's time to explore a little bit more. And, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But we're not going to just win straight up. We're not going to win playing Thibs ball. Is that a realization that's come? Do we wish it would have come earlier? Well, there's an idiom in Gujarati that's basically, when you wake up, that's when it's morning, right? So you wake up at 11:30, you wake up at 1 p.m. It's morning then. So it's still time to do what you need to do. And it gives you hope that maybe next year you try more of those things, or you learn a little bit more. But if this is the reason why he's taken so much criticism, is because you're like, in this series, you're going to get fucking blown out. You're not giving us a chance. Certainly gave us a chance yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I loved your analogy. All exploits, or any exploit's a total exploit. The thing that's kind of a sticking point with me, this isn't going to be like some fire Thibs campaign at all, but the issue
I have, he's holding onto his hair.
No. Again, I respect his conviction. The issue I have is that, in my opinion, we still aren't sure that this version of the Knicks is the best version of the Knicks. So, that's the value of a regular season, is to try all these different things and all these different styles and figure out what lineups work best, what strategies work best, what tactics work best. So if you were going to bring Thibs back, for starters, and I don't want to get to, I'm sure you guys will talk about this in the summer. We do our fun over-under show every year, so I'm sure I'll be back soon enough.
Oh, yeah, I gotta revisit how we did on those.
I think that if you bring him back, one, there has to be some expectation of, okay, you saw the merits of, going outside your comfort zone a little bit in this matchup. Maybe we need to be a little bit more prepared to do that and use the regular season with these players who, we know these guys are like battle tested. We know that we're not at risk, sans, crazy injury luck or anything like that, of like missing the playoffs. Let's use this regular season to try more of these ideas. And the second thing, and this was the thing I was referencing when I said I'm sure you'll talk about it over the summer, is if they lose to Boston and we're going to bring Thibs back, I think they have to heavily look into trying to turn Towns into Giannis, like heavily. I think that's how you can make Thibs work to the like that would be to me the final step of the Thibs era in terms of like now you have this team that is perfectly Thibs proofed, and it would be very hard for him to do things. It would still be possible, but it'd be very hard for his biases and rigidity to not correlate with the strengths of the roster. I do have concerns specifically if you're attached to this core with Towns at center. I would personally have reservations about Thibs ever fully embracing and maximizing the Towns at 5 and all the strengths it's supposed to bring.
So what I would, I think those are both you guys brought up good points. I think they're fair. What I would throw at this, and I'm going to just do a little devil's advocate thing because I don't fully buy into all these things, but I think they're fair to bring up. So if we just look at this roster on its face, to the point you made, like, I do think this was challenging for Thibs this year because, like, look, he's been our coach now for 5 years. We don't need to get into, like, what does he want? What are his biases? I think we all know what they are. I think it's fair to say that this roster challenged him in ways that definitely the roster of the last 2 years didn't. In terms of what was available to him at the center position, the fact that, like, you didn't really have a true 4 on the roster in any way, all these type of various different things. You know, and I think obviously we know that he, like, for him to trust players is a very, like, you know, it takes a little while. We know that he prefers, like, there's like a modicum of cumulative size that he wants to have on the floor at all times. This team was small in a lot of ways, and you know that's been the case for him last couple of years. He's found ways to get over that and utilize the players he does have. So, like, I would say, okay, we bring him back to the point you're making about Giannis. Let's just say, you know, Giannis is not coming here. He's going to go to fucking OKC or whatever the hell it is. Let's just say he just does not end up in New York. What I would throw at you is what I think, if I'm the front office, then I would look at is like, okay, you did these things in the Celtics series. We like that you did these things in the Celtics series. This is a very good step that has been made. And hopefully, you know, now that we've seen this, you will do more of this. To the point you're talking about in terms of Thibs proofing the roster and, you know, the issues he has with Cat, because Cat at the 5 is, you know, it's not as easy as just being like, you know, just, hey, Cat, shoot threes. Like, you actually have to, like, do stuff to, like, get him to shoot threes and create them. And look, it's not all on Thibs. There are way too many times Cat is like, oh, I'm open, let me pump fake and now drive into the paint. Like, that's also on Cat. But what I would throw at that is, like, I think if you know who Thibs is, one thing that is fair to me to bring up, and look, we have talked about this also previously. One of the frustrations I had with Thibs earlier in the season was, hey man, I know you as a coach. I know you want to play like double big at, like, a lot of times. I don't care that you don't trust Huck Forty. Like, let's just see what it looks like with him and Cat on the floor. Maybe let's just, like, see what that looks like. But if you're going to bring him back, I think it's very important that if you don't get Giannis, I think a guy that you need to go get is like a Walker Kessler. I think it's important that you get a player like that allows you to play Cat at the 4 next to a center who fits, like, you know, everything that Thibs wants from his centers, right? Rim protection, strong offensive rebounding, strong defensive rebounding.
And we've seen proof of concept, right? Next to, I'm not saying Walker Kessler is Rudy Gobert, but we've seen that work, right? It got them to the Western Conference Finals. So.
Right. So I think, like, if you're going, and I'm not, and to be clear, this is not a knock on Mitch, but I do think you have to be realistic about, we know what Mitch's injury history is, and we know he's missed time in multiple seasons, right? He's missed time this year, obviously, most of the season. He missed time last year. He missed time in 2020, 2021. You know, he's going to miss time. And I don't think, like, I'm almost of the opinion that you need to give him a stable of bigs if you're going to bring him back. And again, like, to the point, you know, if you can't get Giannis, I think you need to do that. And then I think he doesn't really have excuses for anything at that point. Like, at that point, because what you've done now is you've given him, hey, look, we're giving you the centers you want. We're giving you options to that position that you want. And you still have the 5-out option, which should still be a fucking lineup you go to every single night, right? Like, you should still always have minutes every single game where you're playing cat at the 5. This should not, if it becomes then like, oh, no, we're never playing cat at the 5, that's also a problem. But like, I just think like bringing him back based on him coaching a good series to me is more than reasonable. And I've been very consistent about this. I thought the entire year, this is the series that was going to make or break whatever his fate was, at least for me. Now that might be I don't know if you guys agree with that in terms of like how my personal decision-making process, but that's just how I felt about it the entire year. And I've been pretty consistent about that. So
yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, if he coaches this series in the manner and the fashion we saw yesterday consistently, and the Knicks put up a good fight, it doesn't matter to me if they it matters to me if they win or lose because I would like to win. That would be nice. But like, if the process is good, and I think if the process is good, the Knicks will be competitive. This is not just going to be like, a Boston fucking celebration of threes for 4 games or whatever. I'm comfortable bringing him back, but I think the front office needs to understand. I think they challenged him this year, and it wasn't. I don't think they made the trades to be like, Thibs, we're challenging you. Prove to us that you're the coach. Like, no, I'm not saying that. But I think the roster they handed him was always going to be challenging for him, given the preferences and biases he has in terms of how he wants a team assembled. But like, so understand that, yes, he coached a good series, but also understand what he wants and what he kind of needs in some ways, and give him that roster to the best of your ability, and remove any, like, because I think this year, I know we disagreed on this even from the start of the year, Jeff, in terms of like what we thought the potential of this Knicks team was. But like, I just want, if you're going to bring him back, I really think it needs to be a scenario where you're like, okay, the depth stuff, all these things that were, whether, however we might feel about them, at least they're like reasonable counters to some of the issues he had. We're going to get rid of, like, we want you to have no excuses. And also we want to have the strongest roster we can possibly field that gives you the ability to play a variety of ways. I mean, and I don't think it's like, oh, big ball is like, oh, playing double bigs is back. I think it's more like, again, like I think the league got way too down on like playing bigs together. And, we're seeing that come back in a lot of ways. Even Boston uses, like, they play double big way more than they ever did last year. So yeah, I don't know. I know that was like a very long-winded thing, but I don't know, that's kind of like what I would say about, like, if you're going to bring Thibs back. I think we both actually kind of agree where you're saying Giannis, and I'm kind of giving the non-Giannis option. But you need to make it a scenario where it's like, okay, well, now we've given you all the things. Like, you have the options now to do everything, right? You have the options to play double big. You have the option to play with, 4 guards, wings, and a rim running vertical threat center. And you have the option with Cat to play 5 out. You have every single option that you could possibly have to play a variety of lineups. Here's the roster. Go win us a championship. That's what I think the goal should be. Whether it's Giannis, I mean, obviously, if it's Giannis, hey, I'll take Giannis. I would take Giannis on the Knicks. But if it's not Giannis, I think there's still options they have and they need to pursue that still kind of like help, as you put it, Thibs proof the roster in some ways.
I just think that what the point you made near the end there is probably the root inspiration of our where we diverge. And it's just that you have been very consistent all season. You didn't and don't think this is a championship level roster. You thought and have thought all along that this team was a step below OKC and Boston and would need significant luck, whether it came from opponent injuries, opponent shooting, whatever it is, to really compete with them. And so you're holding Thibs to that bar. You're like, this isn't a championship level team. Don't need to beat Boston. I agree with you. I don't think that Thibs' job should be immediately, and I haven't felt this way all season. I don't think that Thibs' job should be determined by whether he does or doesn't beat Boston. But I do think that this core, this 7 or 8 man core, can be a fringe championship level contender. I've felt that way from the start of the season. I think they have the skill and the synergy and the potential, the theoretical synergy to hit a ceiling that is amongst the championship contenders. And so to me, the concern isn't, oh, you lost a 7-game series to a really good Boston team. That means you're a bad coach. No, the concern to me would be a struggle of maximizing this core. And I think if you look back at past teams, we've had similar conversations of like, okay, this is an elite floor raising coach who gets certain things out of a team. But does he push the buttons to find the ceiling? Does he have the awareness and willingness to say, oh, I can't put RJ and Hart 1 and 2 passes away from Brunson against a Miami team. I have to go a different direction. I know it's working, but it's working for other reasons. Do I go away from Elfrid Payton for a younger or a better player? You have all this evidence that.
Well, Miles McBride wasn't on the roster yet. Who are you talking about?
Your favorite player, Stacy. Your favorite player, Stacy.
I actually, sorry to interrupt. I do want to ask you. I think Shwin and I both agree, and I don't think it's universal. The Knicks were the more talented team than Miami, and they lost because of coaching. You would agree with that, I think, right?
Yes, that was. I think that was, even with the injuries, that was they were handed a gift in that second round, and losing that series.
He punted game 3 just like with the starting lineup of that game. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to start Josh Hart and RJ Barrett." I was like, "Yep, this game is over."
Was it? And then it was game 6, right? Shwin, the game you always point to. Was it game 6 or game 4 in Miami where the Knicks were up double digits and then he ran that insane, that insane lineup. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I don't want to do the Thibs postmortem thing because I do think that he should be given an opportunity to coach the rest of this series. Maybe he'll outcoach Joe Mazzulla in a playoff series and they'll win. Then I'm not acting like my perspective is locked in. It's definitely not. But I do think that if we're going down this rabbit hole of is it possible for Thibs to have a good process series where they come up short against Boston and then you just re-Thibs proof the roster? I just personally, my concern would be why should we believe that the next roster he's going to push the right buttons and diversify lineups and schemes? I get yelled at on Hot Hand Theory all the time for adding an H to schemes. Paul schemes. I just personally, I would just be like, is this when he turned the corner? He's 68 years old, and this just woke him up. I don't know. So that's sort of my core belief. But to your point, and to everybody's point, probably, I wouldn't. If the Knicks felt that way, if the Knicks lose in 6 or 7 close games to Boston, and they're like, man, Thibs coached a hell of a series, and this is our guy, and he's been here 5 years, and this is the most successful stretch the franchise has had since the 90s. Would I begrudge them for feeling like they can just make slight improvements to the roster and do better next season? No, absolutely not. That's not crazy to me.
Yeah, it's I definitely agree with that. I think that to me is like a no-brainer. If it's 6 or 7 games against this team and he does everything, I think if he's willing to do it in a playoff series, I would have more faith, I think, in the regular season. I guess that's maybe where I disagree with you a little bit, Jeff. In terms of Giannis, though, if you feel after this series that you need to replace Cat with Giannis to make Thibs work, what I would throw back is the same thing I throw back, because I'm probably not as staunchly critical of Thibs as you've been, Jeff, or even you, Shwin. But the critique I have thrown back to people is like whenever they nitpick and they're like, oh, they don't have a backup point guard, they need another wing, they're not athletic. It's like, do you need this guy do you need him to coach Oklahoma City to win? And if so, how many coaches would win with Oklahoma City? Doc Rivers could lend that team to a title. So
I don't know. Doc Rivers has a special ability to, like, we talk about Thibs. Yeah,
Thibs on the bench, actually.
It is funny, Stacy, how often pro Thibs arguments tend to be basically just like coaching doesn't actually matter. Like he needs like that's basically what their argument gets reduced to is like, anybody could do this.
Yeah, it's how I feel as still a Nick Sirianni critic in some ways, because I'm like, he literally got handed the perfect roster. That's by the way, the Eagles won the Super Bowl, in case anyone didn't remember. But I did want to ask you this, Jeff. Like, if the reasoning is we need Giannis here to make Thibs work, there's a lot of coaches that could probably make Giannis. I'm assuming we keep OG Anunoby and of course Jalen Brunson to work together. I mean, people point to, oh, Dame didn't work with Giannis. An aging Dame is not this version of Jalen Brunson. A prime Dame is it may be better, honestly, but different player, right? Not. I think Brunson is a better off-ball player. You might disagree. I think Brunson fights a little bit more on defense, but isn't that if you still feel like you need to get Giannis, not like, oh well, yeah, obviously if you can turn Cat into Giannis, you do it. Doesn't that kind of not really outweigh the coaching question? That's like, yeah, there's a lot of coaches that could probably win with Giannis and Brunson.
So my perspective
And
about
OG,
that is that specifically it's a Towns it's a Towns bug. It's not even so much about the feature of getting Giannis. It's that I just would not be like Shwin brought up. Oh, you got to go get Walker Kessler. I personally wouldn't. I would have just kept Randall and Dante if we were going to turn Towns into Minnesota Towns, like with Gobert. That's disastrous to me. I mean, you could make the argument that Randall at power forward is better than Towns at power forward, especially
if I disagree strongly on defense, shooting, spacing.
They don't utilize the spacing. I'm saying in the Thibs system where advantage creation is king, and they clearly want a guy who's not named Jalen Brunson to take the ball, create advantages, draw two to the ball, find shooters that way. You could make an argument that Randall is at least close to Towns at power forward. Then you get Dante DiVincenzo as a throw-in, and it's like not close. To me, if you're getting Towns for those two guys, it's all about chasing the upside, chasing, holy shit, we have OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and Deuce McBride, 4 guys who are wings, who are plus defending wings, 3 of whom are theoretically very good shooters. We can just have these 2 amazing offensive players and then just surround them with defense and shooting, and you chase that upside. And if Thibs is not willing to chase that upside, I don't know how viable Towns is long-term to this team. With Thibs as coach, to be clear.
The Towns thing is kind of interesting because I've thought about this a lot. Like, if you do all these, whatever you do, I just for the hell of it, right? You can let me trade Cat to Utah for John Collins and Kessler or whatever. And it's you get the numbers at the end of the trade where they're like, oh, the Knicks are -3 wins and the Jazz are +4 wins or whatever the hell it is. And I'm like, this makes sense. But then I'm like, I'm almost positive that if Thibs has Kessler, the Knicks win more regular season games than if they had Cat at center. And I just find that very it's kind of crazy to think about that, but I just believe that. Look, I don't want to do too much more about Thibs' long-term stuff because I think it's worth talking about this amazing game that we just won. But yeah, look, I think more or less, regardless of, I do heavily suspect, given that they won their first round series, and I will say, maybe we were all a little bit too harsh potentially on being a little bit too dismissive of how the Knicks should have dispatched Detroit to some extent. I think they're actually a good basketball team. The last 3 months of the season, they graded out basically by any measure as a top 10 team. They were pretty easily the only good first round opponent a team would have had to face in the East, which apparently the Knicks are addicted to doing. So given that they won that series, given the roster turnover that he's kind of coached through now over the year, and contingent on a continued competitive showing against Boston, I would highly suspect that he's back next season. And if that's the case, regardless of what we all think they should do, or is Cat at the 4 or the 5, and how do we unlock all these things, I think it's imperative on the front office though to give him options that just give them more versatility, and regardless of which way they go, whether that is we want to embrace being this bruising front court with a bunch of size, or we love the cat at the 5 thing. Thibs, we're going to figure that out better next year, how to fully unlock every avenue of success that it gives you offensively. And we're going to get more perimeter depth so that, we have more options in that sense. Whichever way they go, that's just going to be the case. All right, moving on from Thibs. And again, kudos to Thibs, coached a really good game yesterday. I want to talk about Mikal Bridges. If you look at the box score, 3 of 13, 8 points. One of the threes he made may or may not have grazed the top of the left backboard. Shout out to to Benji for doing his Zapruder film study of that shot. I can't say enough about the 2 second halves he's put together here in back-to-back games against Detroit, and then to help close out that game, and then his game last night. I think he played 51 minutes yesterday. He was the shooting with him this year is just, I don't know. Well, we just have to continue to ride the roller coaster for now. But this is this is the guy that you traded for on the defensive end of the floor, no question, right? You look at the way he's fighting over screens. Like you talked about, the Knicks did a good job of keeping Brunson away as much as possible from just switching on a Tatum. I think a huge part of that was how locked in OG was, obviously, as the primary defender on Tatum. But also, I think, look at how fluid him and Mikal were with switching, and how tied together they were in their communication. I just can't say enough about what Mikal Bridges did defensively in this game. I thought he was tremendous. And, you're going to need him to shoot better than 3 of 13 to win this, if you have any chance of winning this series. But you're also going to need him to keep up this defensive effort that he put in yesterday, because that was a special defensive performance from him, especially I thought in the fourth quarter and overtime. He was fucking nails. And you could tell that when Tatum and Brown had opportunities to attack him, they were like, yeah, we bodied this guy in the regular season. We're going to body him again. And look, Tatum's always going to have a physical advantage. They're both going to have physical advantages over him in terms of strength and power. But I thought his compete level, his fight, and his intensity really, really made it difficult for them. And it was the same case in that, as that Piston series went along, I think that you saw more and more of that coming out. And he's peaking, at least on the defensive end of the floor, right when the Knicks really need him to. And shout out to Mikal Bridges for having the appropriate, the way that I'll say this, the way that Thibs treated the regular season, I think Mikal Bridges copied that in many ways, where he was like, oh, we're going to play drop fucking 95,000 times. That's fine. I'm just not going to fight over a single fucking screen this entire season, and you'll just have to live with it. But he stepped up when the Knicks have needed him to. And I think switching more and just the coverages the Knicks are at least attempting now kind of show you the value, and not just OG. Well, obviously OG, which I think everybody always knew, but also it's like, yeah, no, this is the, like I said, Mr. 5 first-round picks enjoyer right here. This is why this is the vision, right? This is the guy that you traded for if you're the front office.
Yeah. Sorry, Stacy. Yeah, I find it fascinating that, if you had told me that Mikal was going to have this sort of breakout game, I know he's a good defender and a really good defender at certain points in Phoenix. I would have assumed that Mikal's breakout games would have had something to do with him finally finding the reins as that tertiary creator that the Knicks so desperately need. And I find it fascinating that it's more OG who's been more aggressive in that way. OG's always talked about wanting more offensive responsibilities, and dumb people like me have just been like, dude, just shut up and defend and shoot threes, please. But he hasn't really been wavered and just keeps expanding his role offensively. And if OG is going to do that, and you have Towns and you have Brunson, it's kind of on Hart and Bridges to find other ways. That's how peak synergy works. Is there's only one basketball, as people like to say. And Bridges certainly found a way yesterday. He got his sporadic shots and he didn't make them very often, but that defensive performance in the second half was nuts. And I said this to my dad when we were watching. Sometimes when you're watching games, you just get a sense of man, it really feels like one team is consistently having an easier time creating shots than the other team. And as the Knicks got deeper into the third and the fourth, it really felt like each possession was a drag for Boston. And even like, that run they went on to get up 20, they hit a lot of tough shots. Tatum hitting step backs and Derek White hitting deep threes. And Stacy said it earlier on this podcast, like, if that's how you lose, that's how you lose to this team. That's okay. Like the worst way you can lose to Boston is how they lost opening night, where they're in drop and Boston's just flinging it around the arc and creating wide open threes. And that you just feel so helpless. Like, but I didn't feel like the Knicks for the most part felt helpless last night. I thought they, in their switch heavy scheme, really, really relied on Bridges and Anunoby and Hart and Deuce when he was on the court. And even Brunson, like I said, and they were just all in the spots they were supposed to be in. They were all, offering nail help at the right time. And they were just doing all these really, really sound things that made it difficult on Boston. And Bridges was a big part of that. So I think Boston...
You had OG tossing Cat into the right place.
Exactly. I think Boston's going to have certain answers. I think they're going to make some more shots. But if I'm a Boston fan, I'm a little bit concerned because the Knicks stealing that game, they're playing game 2 with house money. This is going to be a very loose team. This is going to be Boston has certain adjustments they can make, but the Knicks can counter. It's not like the Knicks went all in on game 1 and there are no more moves left. This is a tactically versatile roster, and there are other things they can do. And I did feel like, I don't know if y'all noticed this, but when Jaylen Brown had the ball and it wasn't, Bridges or OG on him, specifically when Towns was on him, they were totally fine letting him walk into pull-up threes.
He doesn't have that first step right now. I don't care if he's not an injury report. He's 100%, not 100. He's not 100%. And it's very, very clear to me. Like, you could see that he does not have the get by right now that you kind of associate with him.
Yeah, and so if you treat him like that, you treat him basically as a non-shooter. Treat him. I mean, I mentioned this in that Strickland article I wrote that everybody seemed to hate until the game 1 was over. If you sort of treat him like Boston treats Hart, not that Brown is less skilled than Hart or the same skill. I think Brown's a lot more skilled when he has the ball in his hands. But I do think that like the macro point that I was trying to make that apparently didn't come through well enough is that the Knicks are pretty big underdogs. And if you can get Boston to drastically alter its approach, you're winning whether you win or not. Like, if Boston's going to go away from Tatum and White and win on the back of Jaylen Brown hitting a bunch of pull-up threes and mid-range shots, and you tip your cap to Jaylen Brown and say, all right, too good, man. Like, you probably, like, it's not, people, when they criticize an idea like that or any outside-the-box idea, there's this implication that, oh, well, they would have won if you didn't do that. Again, the Knicks were plus 550 going into this series. It's just like, if they played regular straight up defense against Tatum, they probably were pretty unlikely to win the series anyway. So these types of outside the box ideas, there's merit to them. And I thought the Knicks did a couple of them specifically with Brown and basically just daring him to shoot. I'll be curious to see how he bounces back in game 2 specifically.
One thing that they also have done with Mikal, this is not on defense, but I think is very, very good and something I've like not fully understood they didn't lean into sooner in the season. If you go back and watch game 6 down the stretch, and then you go back and watch yesterday, especially in the second half, but down the stretch, they're using Mikal now a lot more often as the like either the on-ball screener for Brunson or setting a ghost screen for Brunson. And I think they've had good success with that. So that's an interesting wrinkle that they've kind of adapted. Also, to the point of like, look, we've talked all year about why don't you have guys set off-ball screens to like pop guys open for 3? Look, it's not perfect. It's not always clean, but and God knows Mikal Bridges is not exactly the world's most intimidating screen setter. But you can like go back and watch some of the threes they were generating. There was one specifically where OG got in the corner, where Mikal is basically setting a screen for him, and he's able to pop open. So like these are good things, and again like speaks to kind of 3 of 13, whatever, doesn't really fully capture everything that Mikal was able to do for the Knicks in this game.
The Cavs run this play I brought up on last week's High Hand Theory that I think the Knicks need to adopt. It's one of the coolest plays in the league. Strus is in the strong corner as like Garland or Mitchell. Mitchell has the ball crossing half court, and Allen is on the weak side nail. And Strus comes and sets a ghost screen, and then Garland hits Strus on the move, which lets him walk into, which is the primary play, a pick and roll with Allen with an advantage. So it's like a Strus-Allen pick and roll, but Strus is operating already on the move ahead of his defender. So it's a way to get like a non-natural initiative.
It sounds a little bit like an Iverson cut or the same kind of concept, right? So.
Yeah, but instead of across the middle, it's across the top of the key. Obviously, it's like a more modernized Iverson cut. But it starts with a ghost screen. And the reason it's so brilliant is because if the defender stays with Strus and Garland or Mitchell is unable to hit him on the move, Allen still screens for Strus, still tries to create an off-ball advantage for Strus on the move, and then just goes and sets a ball screen for Garland, and they run into their backup play. So it's like a very like systemic action with counters and stuff. And I could just picture it with Bridges in the strong corner going to set a ghost screen for Brunson and Towns being the one to wait for him. It would be a good way to get multiple players advantages within the possession.
Yeah, I want to go back to Bridges, and then I want to ask you a question on that, Jeff. Actually, more of a philosophical question on the structure in basketball. I do think it was very, very meaningful that Bridges' signature play, and that will be a signature play, something that'll be remembered, was with 3 seconds left. He just fucking took the ball. That's the last. You can talk about, he can bother shots with his length, right? He had the block on Schroeder when Schroeder was still in Brooklyn, right? Wow. Schroeder's just been too many games against Schroeder, man. I'm glad we don't have to play that guy for a while. That was for a guy who's been called soft, not tough. He just fucking took. It was like watching John Favreau in The Replacements. Just when he takes the ball, I got you the ball, Thibs. Go sit down now, Mikal. I do want to throw this back to you, Jeff, a little bit, because this is kind of a broader thing. Because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Is sometimes the not from you. I'm just saying in general for all of us. I think how we think about it. On the one hand, we call Thibs a control freak, too rigid. His philosophy is obviously prevent turnovers, likes isolation. On the other hand, we're like, we need more structure, right? But structure can make the offense, prevents players from playing freely. But sometimes, to your point, I think the point you just made is a really good one. The play that you just described, it allows for creativity. It allows for multiple options where instead of starting, when everything is an option, nothing is an option, right? Because nothing comes to your mind. Everything it's the paradox of choice or whatever. But when you have these 3 options, that allows you to be creative. How do you think about that trade-off? Because this is something you talk about a lot, and I really enjoy listening to you speak about it. How do you think about what is that? Maybe it's minimum viable level of structure. How do you think about that trade-off between, to a certain point, structure increases creativity, then it can become imprisoning, whatever.
So to be clear, we're talking about like freelance offense versus organized offense, basically.
Yeah, the trade-off. Is there a point where you have too much structure?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't know if I know Shwin does, but for any listeners out there who don't follow, I think Shwin, you've actually had him on the show. Krangis, Tim NBA is a big. It's like the main thing he covers over there on his Lakers Exceptionalism pod is basically organized offense rate versus freelance, and he is a big proponent of basically doing away with freelance offense as much as possible. And he has the data to back it up and how much more successful offenses are in organized offense versus a freelance. I lean his way, but I very strongly empathize with what I think is your underlying point, which is that you can have structure, but how consistently, there are intangible factors here that can't possibly be reflected by this data that is occurring over. I don't think you can extrapolate a 50% organized offense rate versus a 50% freelance rate and be like, oh well, if they just were organized 100%, they would carry over that same efficiency.
I also think it's a gradient too, right? It's not binary. There's extremely structured, and then there's loose structure with options and in the middle, right? So
it's a really good point. I would argue for more structure and more organized offense from the Knicks. and I would argue that they should infuse similar off-ball actions the way that other teams have. But I totally get that you have a guy like Jalen Brunson. It might be irresponsible in a way that I or anybody else analyzing who's never been in an NBA locker room, has never interacted with these people, it might be irresponsible to say to Jalen Brunson, like, I'm going to like control everything you do on the court and you have to do this and like you have to run the plays the way I want to. I mean, we've seen guys like Larry Brown, Rick Carlisle had some issues with Jason Kidd late in the Dallas career. Like we've seen control freak coaches, and Thibs is a control freak in his own way. But we've seen those types of control freak coaches clash with players. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I do think that my answer right now is I find it more complicated than maybe more data-driven people than I am would find it. But if I had to choose like an extreme, I would probably want my offense to lean more in the organized offense rate, and I would probably want the Knicks to as well.
Yeah, no, I think the Knicks definitely get into a little too much Brunson figure it out ball. Like that's kind of like what they do at the end of games. And look, I think everybody wants like, you want like a flowing system and all these different options and everything, set after set after set. Like NBA players just, one of the things is like Rick Carlisle, when they won the championship with the Mavs in 2011, there's a whole thing before that season where like they traded for Jason Kidd. I think it was the year before, maybe 2 years before, whatever it was. And Kidd and him initially butted heads because Carlisle's constantly he was constantly on the bench calling out set plays. And Kidd's like, dude, like, let me be this, like a Hall of Fame point guard. Like, that's why you pay me, right? Like let me kind of call the show here. And so there's definitely like a give and take there, right? Like a coach probably would love if his team came down every single time and ran, a perfectly designed set or something. It's just also not realistic to expect that. And like guys are going to freelance, guys are going to go off script, and also like defenses are going to take you out of what you want to do. So you need guys to be able to play off of that and adjust. Do I think the Knicks get into like freelance stuff too often? Yeah, I do. And I think that's usually, and I think Thibs allows that. And I think that's why even last year when we had like the second best offense or whatever it was in the playoffs, almost every game you'd have these like insane 4-minute stretches where they couldn't score. You were like, why are we just like incapable of scoring? And you see that pretty frequently with Thibs teams. And that's, again, would I like to see more? Yeah, of course. And that's why I wanted to bring up the Mikal stuff from yesterday, because it was good to see him not just setting more screens on ball, but actually using him as an off-ball screener. That's stuff that we've complained about a ton and wanted more of. And I certainly feel like that's still something that can be very low-hanging fruit for them that they can incorporate more and just give themselves a little bit more juice on offense. Now, is that going to turn them into like, the greatest offense of all time? No, I'm not saying that, but every little bit that you can add to like increase your margin matters, especially when you're the underdog in a series like this. So, like I don't know how much Thibs, we don't know this because we're not in the locker room, and I don't know how we would determine it. I don't know how much Thibs controls what goes on. I don't know if he's constantly like, how much of the offensive system is just what he wants, how much he defers to any assistants, how much, information and input he gets from the front office and analysts or whatever. We don't know. But I do think that they could use a little bit more creativity on offense. I think in the regular season, what he does is perfectly fine for the most part. And, the Knicks have had a top 3 offense in 2022-23. They had the 7th best offense, I think, in 23-24. And this year they finished 5th or 6th it was in offensive rating. Like he's going to, like, what he does, whether you like it or you think it's optimized or not, or any of us do, he's going to get results from it if you give him good talent. But yeah, would I like to see a little bit more creativity? And do I think that would benefit them in the playoffs? Yeah, I do. And, maybe that's part of going out and bolstering your assistant coaching staff again. Like, I do think brain drain is a real thing. You lost Mike Woodson pretty early on after he was appointed. Kenny Payne, who was a terrible head coach in college, who was a good assistant coach for the Knicks and at Kentucky, he was gone after a year. Johnny Bryant is gone. Like they've lost guys that were part of that initial coaching staff, and they've gone to like Maurice Cheeks and whatever. I do think they probably could use an influx of talent on the bench. We focus so much on players, and obviously that is the most important part of basketball. But like, I do think coaching is real, and has real value. So, like, I would like to see more there, and I do think that it can also help them get better results on the floor in terms of their process.
I'd sign for the same organized offense rate if the Knicks could just drastically improve their spacing principles. If the offense looked exactly the same, but like the times they ran a double drag screen, OG and Towns didn't just like trail Brunson inside the arc, or Landry Shamet, who's out there to do one thing, nonsensically cutting from a wide open corner 3 off ball to like do what? To get blocked at the rim, like rather than just shooting the open 3. I would sign for that today for the Knicks because their spacing principles, and they were actually really, really sound in game 1, which again is like, why did they know to correctly space out this whole game? Why did they just start focusing on that? I think there's a world where even if they didn't ever go to the Deuce with the starters lineup, I think there's a world where you have tons of space and you use Josh Hart as like this floating roamer who sets all these screens and you get these little back cuts, almost like he's Draymond Green, like he could be the one on the block and he could be setting these flare screens and back.
Are we allowed to say this? Josh Hart is a way better offensive player than Draymond Green in 2025. It makes me happy.
we are allowed to say it, but I do think that there's a world where those things occur and the offense looks exactly the same. It's just they're spaced out better. So I would sign for that.
They space out plenty on defense. Actually, fewer times yesterday. I actually
he was awesome yesterday, man. Josh Hart was fucking
great. I said they as a team, yeah. But Josh Hart was. I mentioned this. Like there are a lot of plays. I mean, he gave them that lift that I think they've missed, frankly, at times against Boston. Where they felt maybe not lacking confidence, but you felt. I think you mentioned this, Jeff. In maybe in different words, but they didn't feel outmatched in quite the same way. I don't know if that was exactly what you said, but even when they were down 16 at half, I was like, all right, well. The hack-a-shack thing kind of took them out of the rhythm, but this is a team that belongs on the floor. That's something you could not say for large portions of the regular season games they had against Boston.
And not just Boston, right? I mean, this is, I think, why there's been such angst with this team. It wasn't just Boston, right? It was OKC. It was fucking Cleveland. Like, I mean, the Cleveland matchup, honestly, Cleveland, I thought those games were they were even more concerning to me than the Boston ones in a lot of ways.
Well, I think part of that is, at least for me, I didn't take Cleveland seriously until I saw it in that game against us. Because we'd beat Cleveland and it's still, Brunson owns Mitchell and all that. But this is a team that is really optimized. I do want to ask you this, Jeff, because I've talked about this a little bit with Shwin. We talked about this in the Cord. I think it's right to be critical of like how much they've used the starting lineup, and Hart does cause very tangible issues. On the other hand, though, right, I am seeing Golden State put out Jimmy Butler, not a three-point shooter, Draymond Green, not a three-point shooter, Gary Payton II, in addition to not being a three-point shooter, a very limited offensive player, who's also 6'2". Now, they have the greatest shooter of all time, and in this era, by many statistical measures, the second best shooter in Buddy Hield. But still, right, if they can make that work, Josh Hart, maybe that's not optimized, right? Maybe Deuce is better at that starting lineup. It should not be that bad, right? Josh Hart should not submarine that lineup, right? Is that kind of your thoughts? Like, because that to me, that's a double kind of, and I don't want to get back to Thibs too much, but that's kind of a double shocking thing where it's like, it's not just that you play it too much, but it's like, even when it plays, it shouldn't be dog shit. It should be good. Maybe it's not the best, but
yeah, I completely agree. Actually, before this season started, and I think I've just maintained this thought, I wasn't even sure that the lineup with Deuce would be better, even though you have the superior shooting. I think Hart offers a number of positive trade-offs in other areas. My whole point about starting Hart was about the rotation, because not to brag or whatever. I feel like I have a sadly good feel for how Thibs rotates and how he views things, just because this shit bothers me so much. And I was very confident that if Hart, Bridges, and OG were the starting wings, that we would just get no lineup diversity at all. And so my goal for the team was like, if you put Deuce in with that starting lineup, and Hart is the Swiss Army knife wing off the bench who comes in for Bridges, and then OG comes out and Bridges comes back in. Now you're getting a larger sample size of all these different lineups. So that was, just to go on a little tangent there about Deuce versus Hart. I can see the positives that Hart brings, and I completely agree with you. It shouldn't be as mediocre as it was throughout the season. It's a really good lineup. It absolutely should be. We see it, across smaller samples with Harden or Deuce in for Bridges, or Deuce in for Hart, or Deuce in for any of those guys. There's no reason that this one lineup should just be league average, or I think it ended the season like the 52nd percentile or something. And to your point, you bring up, Golden State. Talk about Houston. Houston has gone with basically a no shooting lineup, just emphasizing completely different positives. Actually, I did a really, really good video essay on it on our YouTube channel. And I think what it comes down to, Stacy, is I think that Thibs is a big fan of half measures. And what I mean by that is he's like, okay, like I don't want to completely ignore shooting, but we want to have a little shooting out there. But I don't want to completely ignore rebounding. I love rebounding. Got to have Josh Hart out there. He wants to have his hand in all these different pies. And there's no like, okay, well, what if this lineup was below average in rebounding, but just so good at this other thing that it just, it does that thing? Or go the other direction. Like, what if you have Hart and Towns and OG and Mitch all out there together? Like, okay, it's not the best spacing lineup, but they're already sort of mitigating spacing. What if they just lean into other strengths? That's the value of trying these different things, is you see what the positive trade-offs versus the negative trade-offs, and what it means for the net. And I just don't know if Thibs really thinks about the net that way. I think he's more about the checking of the boxes. And it's like, okay, I've got my rebounding out there, I've got my shooting. And I think that that's kind of hurt them in terms of their lineup deployment and how they've managed to how the lineups have performed, should I say. I got to say, though, like, as someone who has gone into post-game interviews and whatever press conferences, talked about like how important net rating is, this season was like even for Thibs beyond extreme in terms of, I mean, I've mentioned this on High, and they played over 25% of non-garbage time minutes, just one lineup. That's like a record. Like, that's legitimately like a record. They spent
a whole quarter a game. Right?
Yeah, they spent a quarter of the season, and this is including the injuries. We know Brunson missed, 15 games. Towns missed some time. Like, they had these guys miss the season, and this one lineup played over a quarter of the season. So I do think it was just sort of a half measure. I also just think, I don't think it was like methodical or by any means. I just think that like methodical is the wrong word there. Jesus, I'm losing it. I don't think it was like he's like, oh, like I just think that he was like, okay, we've got our shooters, and I love Josh Hart. I think that's just what it was. Like I think that he really
I think premeditated was the word you're using for.
Yeah, that's what I was going for there. I think he really loves Josh Hart. I think Josh Hart deserves that love from his coach. Like, I think any coach would love Josh Hart. So I kind of empathize with it on some level.
Yeah. Josh Hart is.
And let's remind everyone, when the Knicks traded Cam Reddish for Josh Hart, and many people were unsure about that, Jeff was very much on the this is a great trade bandwagon, not just because Cam Reddish was not very good at basketball, but for all the great things that Josh Hart brought to the Knicks, as we've seen.
I would be such an annoying Josh Hart stan if he was just playing like 32 minutes a game. Like I would be, because I actually weirdly think that Hart's impact has been suppressed, because what the lineup data reflects is that, like, he's the only constant and this team is underperforming, and that I think that's unfair to him. I don't think that he is being put in his, I don't think go out there and be in any lineup is the Josh Hart role. I think that's a misinterpretation of his sort of Swiss Army knife profile. I think you need to put him in, first of all, and going forward, I feel very strongly about this. I think he needs to play 100% of the minutes Brunson sits. I think you see him push the pace, and I think it is most valuable when Brunson is not on the court, because they absolutely suffer in the half court when Brunson is not out there, especially against a team like Boston. You have Hart out there for those minutes, all of a sudden the value of the thing he does arguably best, well, definitely best on the Knicks, but I'm saying his best skill amplifies. And so, yeah, I think it's about how you use him, just like for any other player. And I think there's a world where, like, I don't know if Hart could, just because of the shooting, could ever have Derek White level impact. But I do think there's a world where, some of these best top-down metrics would have Hart as the second, third, fourth best Knick, and he would just be, you would have losers like me being like, well, actually Hart's really, it's a really tough subject because he's such a likable player. He leaves it all out there, and he probably wants to play every minute.
Sorry, Shwin, I did want to ask one other thing. One, I think we should have done this a 4-person pod after yesterday. I think Tyrese versus Jeff on Deuce McBride would be a great pod on itself. I do want to talk about Deuce real quick. It's probably, he's a subject that gets too much attention, not from you necessarily, just I think in general when he has a bad game.
Oh, no. I think Deuce gets too much attention from Jeff. I think Jeff would admit that.
Yeah. It's fine with me. I'm fine.
You and XJ have both been pretty firm that, I don't even think I was here, because I think, I defended quickly during the playoffs, the only playoffs really where he had significant time. It's Miami and Cleveland before he got hurt, where even though he was shooting well, the on-off really bore out that he was a very impactful player. I did believe that because he was their best team defender. He pushes the pace. He took the right shots, right? He wasn't hitting them. I did not buy that with Deuce as much. He's a very good on-ball defender. He kept jumping for fakes. Maybe that's, again, that optics thing that we're talking about where you're kind of overweighing it. I really thought he submarined the offense at times. Just not even just, it's one thing if you miss shots, but just, the tunnel vision and the decision-making I didn't like. But yesterday he hit shots, and I think everyone's happy, right? So I'd love for you to go in a little bit more about that, because I think in principle, I would generally agree with you on this point that, look at the impact, not just did they hit shots. I agreed with that quickly during that playoffs. I didn't see it with Deuce, but do you think everyone's just happier just because the shots fell, or do you think there was more than that? Or
it's definitely just being results oriented in that way. But I will say, so let's just put this thing aside. Game 6, he was objectively awful. I didn't say anything after that. If anybody wants to crap on what Deuce did in Game 6, he looked like a deer in headlights out there. That was a terrible performance. I thought games 1 through 5 was just pretty much normal Deuce. He just wasn't making shots. I thought for the most part he was good on the ball. I agree with you that there were, he played 79 minutes in 5 games, so less than 16 minutes a game. You have a couple times where you fall for a Dennis Schroeder pump fake and foul him. Those are going to be louder. I don't want to speak against Tyrese when he's not here to defend himself, but I will say
that's why I said we should have had the melee. But
I will say the thing I've always pushed back against is this is a guy who's a min contract level player, or not level player, a min contract level contract. He's one of the best salary, but one of the best non-max, non-rookie contracts in the league. And I just find it strange to spend all season talking about him when all the metrics say otherwise. That to me, that's just strange. It just seems like there's better use of your time. And I don't understand Knicks fans who would be like, what are you expecting him to be? What are the expectations here? But as far as him as a player, I thought, and in games 1 through 5 in the Detroit series, I think what the data was reflecting in a similar way to Quickly is that his presence moves other players into more optimized roles. And that's what I've always felt about him. I've always felt that his strengths, and what he's able to do on the ball on defense and as a shooter off the ball, especially, he's such a good catch and shooter. And he has shown that if he's open, he's going to shoot it. Whether he's 0 for 6, he's not one of those guys. It's I don't have it tonight, I'm not going to shoot. That other teams have to respect that.
He's better at than Quickly, by the way, because he has the
quicker release,
right? So
Great point in that comparison. I would get frustrated with Quickly when he was having slow nights and he would do the high pump fake thing and then try to probe inside the arc. I think Deuce is going to launch, and I think that defenses respect that, and it allows his teammates to play 4-on-4 when he's off the ball. So to me, those are two incredibly valuable things that maybe we watching the game can't properly understand. I went on like a pretty long-winded rant the other day with XJ where we were talking about like impact metrics and just data itself. And the one thing I feel like people don't at all, and I'm sure you do, Stacy, I know you're brilliant with this stuff, but if you're an eye test guy and you're one of those, you pride yourself on being able to see all these things that are happening. Like, you can see, oh man, Deuce is really good at navigating screens, or Grimes is really good at navigating screens, and man, Mikal's not that good. Even if you're adept at seeing those things, you have no way to figure out how, from a team impact standpoint, what it's worth. So like being able to see and identify, hey, good screen navigation there. Hey, not so good screen navigation. Okay, what does that mean? It's like the It's Always Sunny episode where Charlie tries to count gas by looking at gas. Like you need something to tell you how much gas is going in the car. You need something to tell you what these screen navigations are worth, what the player's presence are worth. And I feel like Deuce is actually is very emblematic of this idea, because consistently since he's joined the rotation, the data has told us that his presence is very, very good for the Knicks, that like when he plays, good things happen. And do I think that he should be your lead guard in a Tom Thibodeau offense? No, I think that actually hurts his value. And more importantly to this conversation, it hurts his perceived value, because his warts on the ball on offense are very loud. He's a bad finisher at the rim. He's not like super good at getting to good spots in the paint.
He pulled out a crazy finish yesterday. I'll take it.
That was awesome. Yeah, I was like, oh my god. I was like, oh my god, he made a layup, and a left-handed layup. So these things are very loud when he's doing that. He's not the greatest passer. He's not when he probes inside the arc and they let him get inside the arc, he's not like creating advantages and finding kickouts. He doesn't do that. But my pushback would be, I don't think it really matters if he's good at those things if he's used correctly. And when he is used correctly, I don't think that anybody just watching knows or is capable of properly calculating how much his shooting gravity, how much his on-ball defense, what it does for his teammates is worth. So that would be my Deuce defense.
Well, the thing with Deuce, I've hated this conversation all year. If a guy is having if he's like in all these lineups that are good and very effective and whatever, I don't actually care that he's shooting poorly, especially if it's a guy that has a track record of playing well, or of shooting well rather, because I'm just going to trust that over time, like the shot will come around. And we had to do this fucking every year with Quickly. Do you remember that? Like every year with Quickly, you'd get out to like this dog shit shooting start. And it'd be like, oh my God, how can you expect Thibs to play? And I'm like, I don't know, because he's got like a fucking 48 true shooting, but we're winning his minutes by like fucking 35 points every night. Like, I don't know. Like, that's it. That's the only fucking reason I can give you. And I understand that's hard for coaches. It's hard for everybody. It's so hard. The hardest thing is to be like, watch a guy struggle offensively, but be like, we're still okay in his minutes. He's still doing enough to justify being out here, especially so for perimeter players, right? We see this every time Mikal Bridges has a bad shooting game. Get him off the floor. He's fucking killing us right now. And I'm like, I don't know, we're like up 7. He's fine, probably. Like it never computes to me, and it's always really frustrating. And I understand it. Like I do understand it. It's actually really hard to like when people are like, he's shooting 32% from the field. I'm like, you know how annoying it is and how like lame it is sometimes to be like, yeah, but he's got like a +7 net rating, and it's like it's like a hard conversation to have, and I understand it. But the thing with Deuce that I kind of feel very strongly about is I can't tell you he's the perfect player. I don't think he's the perfect player. I don't think he's the 5th best player in the team. I don't think he's not a guy I would be looking at if I'm the Knicks and being like, we can't trade this guy. No, I'm not saying like you can definitely trade Deuce McBride. Like that's a guy you can 100% trade. But I'm not interested in also, like, I'm not desperate to trade him. I'm not trying to give him away. I'm not like, oh man, if we can just get a couple seconds for him, get him out the door. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me either. And
you wouldn't want Davion Mitchell instead of
Davion Mitchell's he made a leap this year. He was actually pretty good this year. So I wouldn't want to do that trade because I don't think that his I don't value the fact I don't value him as much as I value Deuce McBride simply because Deuce plays well with our star point guard. I don't think Davion Mitchell can do any of those things. But yeah, like to get back to it, I just think Deuce is really like, again, he's not the best player in these lineups. He's not the reason. He is not like the magic sauce in these lineups that makes them go. But what he does, what he provides, allows at times.
He's like the lube.
Yeah, he allows a better platform for a guy like Jalen Brunson to perform, for a guy like Cat to perform. Like, I think there's things he does defensively that help protect Cat, that help protect Jalen Brunson. And I also think that, like, he is inherently, like, I think I said this when me and Prez did the pod on over the weekend. I felt this way very strongly. I think the Celtics matchup is a better matchup for him than Detroit. Like, I think that it's a better matchup for him. They don't have herky-jerky ball handlers. Like, Tatum isn't as good of a pick-and-roll ball handler and getting into the mid-range and operating in that capacity in the way that Cade Cunningham is. Like, they don't run their offense that way, right? Like, they don't do those things. So I think this is a better matchup for him. And I thought he did a really good job yesterday at times when he's on Jaylen Brown, right? When he's on Tatum. When he was on, I thought Pritchard, he did a really good job on Pritchard. The 2 threes Pritchard got when he was nominally being defended by Deuce were when Mitch was in drop, actually. So he's able to come around the screen and get a clean look at it. Again, I don't think, I'm not even asking Deuce. I never even once this year was like Deuce McBride has to start. Because I don't really think it matters who starts if you're just willing to, like, vary lineups a little bit more often than the Knicks have under Thibs. I just think he's a guy that clearly should play like 25 minutes on this team. And I don't think that's like a crazy fucking thing. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, he had a bad first round series. I'm going to trust the longer sample that says that he's a productive player, and forget being a productive player individually, a player who the Knicks have generally done well on the floor with. That's what matters. It doesn't matter to me that fucking, I mean, yes, of course it matters that he's struggling, but within, like, you can struggle and still be useful on the floor. And I did not feel that for the first 5 games of that Pistons series, he was doing anything other than individually struggling. There's a difference between I'm struggling individually versus I'm killing the team. Like, he killed the team in game 6. He was awful in that game. He's terrible. Yeah. Like, I don't know what else to say. He was destructively bad. Like, Cat,
it was unreal.
Yeah, Cat.
Actually, I said it was like rookie year Obi.
Yeah, it was fucking brutal to watch it. I didn't even know what the hell was going on with him. But I trust the sample. I'm like, okay, we have a long sample here of evidence of him playing in a variety of lineups. And basically, anytime he plays with somebody else who can handle the fucking rock, he is fine in those lineups. Undersized, perfectly sized matchup. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, those lineups are good. And if he goes 0 for 4 next game, I'm sure the same people will be like, oh, I told you he's fucking terrible. And it's like, is he terrible? I don't know. I don't think he's terrible. I think he's got real limitations. I think he's very good at certain, you know what? I'll say this. He's kind of like a little bit in a way, like a guard version of Mitch, where it's like the things he does well, he does very well. And then the things he's not good at are like things he should never do. You're like, yeah, actually maybe never run a pick and roll ever again in your life. Please don't ever take a contested shot at the rim. Like there are just things he does, like he should never do.
He puts his head down every time he dribbles.
Yeah,
like,
I can't believe this guy played quarterback. I gotta be honest with you. It's fucking shocking to me this guy played quarterback, because the amount of times he just doesn't see anything, I'm like, it's stunning.
I mean, he wasn't a flash in the pan.
Stacy,
goddamn quarterback.
Stacy, you should be victory lapping Deuce harder than anybody. You were the first.
He can't. He jumped off the wagon. He was fucking praising Tyrese.
I watched Game 6. Deuce's head was in the toilet. His hair was in the toilet.
Disgusting.
Disgusting.
No, it was, but like,
I said my piece.
I hate talking about Deuce because I'm just like, I don't understand how a player like this is controversial. And I don't understand how it's controversial on a team that we all are like, yeah, the depth kind of sucks. Is like,
I think the expectations are pretty high coming to the year. I mean, if you remember before the year, he had high 6-man odds. He was like, we were saying, right? When we were doing our like previews, we were like, they have Pritchard, we got Deuce. And Pritchard took a leap also. That's worth mentioning.
Pritchard also got to play a bunch with the starters and
but I also think, I mean, he has, I think for me, like I was critical of the Tyler Kolek pick. I'm too critical because it's a second round pick. But my whole thing was people were like, we need to get Kolek. We need a true point guard. And I was like, so we're sacrificing the best thing Deuce brings, which is point of attack defense, which holds that lineup up, and just giving up on the fact that maybe this guy will start to develop more to bring in a true point guard. Deuce, that development, I thought he had gotten better progressively until this year. That just, it hasn't come. It's probably not going to happen, right? Like, I think Quickly did improve from that. Like, if you look at Quickly, rookie, wasn't a great playmaker, was a little tunnel vision. That evolved. He's a true point guard. I mean, he's a combo guard, but he is very capable of doing that in a way that Deuce probably never will be. And I'd expected to see more of that. And I think a lot of people did, and I think those expectations were probably unrealistic, right? In hindsight.
Quickly, I mean, I know this isn't the Toronto pod, but Quickly has come along more as a point guard than as a shooter in Toronto. His passing, he is a low-key great passer now. It's weird to watch. If Knicks fans don't watch a lot of Raptors games, they'd be very surprised to watch Quickly if they remember him from 2022 and 2023. I completely agree with you. I don't think Deuce will make a leap in that way. But I think the simple fit, like I always get frustrated when, it happened in the Detroit series, maybe less in the Detroit series, because like Shwin said, Deuce wasn't particularly great in that series. But I don't like when Payne minutes come at the expense of Deuce, because Thibs is like, we need someone to run the offense. Like, just run it through Mikal. Like Mikal is a fine enough secondary option.
Or Hart. You mentioned Hart.
Yeah. Right. You could any of those guys. Like if you have Mikal, Hart, and Towns on the court with Brunson on the bench, you should not have Payne out there instead of Deuce, because you need a point guard. Like it's nonsensical. But I think just greater point. I completely agree with Shwin, and I think that my almost dismissive nature on social media or on Twitter or whatever is because of the point Shwin made. And that's just like, I don't understand why people talk about him at all. Like I get it. He's a Knick, and we're going to talk about but I don't get why there's not a more simpler understanding of like, this is a guy the Knicks are paying 4 years, $11 million or whatever. Like, I don't get it. Like, he's clearly a plus player, not just on his contract. He's an above average player in the league, and he's a good defender who shoots like 45% on catch and shoot threes. To me, it should be really simple. You should understand that when you're a role player, especially in a Tom Thibodeau offense, there's going to be some variance to your shooting. It's not always you're not just going to go 4 for 10 every night. You're going to have some 0 for nights. You're going to have some great nights. And I don't know, maybe it's more difficult than I'm letting on, but I just feel like he should be one of the last things discussed, unless it's like game 6 and it's very extreme, or it's like game 1 and it's sort of extreme the other way where he played really well.
I do want to, so this is, you mentioned victory lapping Deuce. Early in his career, his 3-point percentage was not very good. I was very high on him as a prospect. I think I wrote his draft profile for the Strickland. I wrote Quickly's too. I think the only thing I'm good at maybe is identifying decent combo guards. Then again, I thought Bones Highland was going to be awesome, and that didn't work out.
Stacy, you're the one who told me. I don't know if you remember this. You might not remember this. This is what I was referencing, though. I made a point of being like, Deuce can't be Quickly because Deuce played point guard in college. He loves shooting off the bounce. We don't want Deuce to be an off the bounce guy. And you said, no, he'll be a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter. I thought, that was extremely accurate by you. I didn't see it. And I feel like a lot of people didn't see it.
Yeah. And I think Prez could do 2 hours just on the topic of how much does pull-up shooting translate to, to catch and shoot and vice versa. That is like his magnum opus. It's like what I think when Prez goes to sleep, the way Oppenheimer would see quantum particles. That's probably what Prez sees as like shooting mechanics. But I think part of it was also his shooting percentage was very poor early in his career. And Your podcast is named the hot hand theory. And I did feel like it's tough to get into a rhythm, right? If you're just one or two at a time, but they say the hot hand doesn't exist. Now there's actually been studies that said the original hot hand paper by Kahneman was disproved because of the sampling error, and it actually does exist a little bit. I mean, do you think there's something to that? Like, we're like, it's not just overall sample; it's sample, like rhythm, those kind of things matter, right? For making
isn't not to go on a tangent, but isn't the fallacy that what's been proven isn't that a hot hand theory doesn't exist? It's that the player is more likely to take a worse shot, and so that's why the percentages are skewed.
I think that was part of it, but I think also it was a statistics professor of Michigan. I can send you the article maybe later, but there was like a sampling bias because they would only look after like a made shot, but that's not the right way to do it. So like if you sample it properly, it actually there is like a small effect in positive direction for hot hand.
Yeah. So to answer your question more specifically about the Knicks and how I feel that this sort of thing, like your role, and like I think we've seen it proven throughout Thibs' tenure. You know, if we just judge it by his tenure, look at pretty much Quickly is the only one who is exempt from this test. But if you look at Grimes, you look at DiVincenzo, you look at Obi Toppin, you have these guys who come off the bench and you get a sample of what they do in the starting lineup and what they do off the bench and how that rhythm and how that consistent role in the offense affects their ability to make shots. And I think it is a very real thing. I mean, the Dante Grimes thing was so incredibly strange to me in the sense of like Grimes started the season in the starting lineup. Remember how people talked about Dante at the start of last season? Like, oh my God, he's getting Quickly's way. He was playing like 14 minutes some games. And then Grimes started doing the weird Grimes thing. And Thibs was like, all right, we're going to try Dante now. And then all of a sudden, Dante's playing 25, 30 minutes a night, firing 10 threes in games, super in rhythm. And Grimes goes to the bench, and the dude can't make anything. Obi goes from sporadic role in New York to a more consistent role in Indiana. Now, all of a sudden, the dude is a sharpshooter. So, yeah, I think it is a very real thing. And to be honest, when you look at Deuce's shooting numbers, it's easy to forget this, but Deuce actually started a fair amount of games at the end of 2024 because of all the injuries. And that's it is the best shooting stretch of his career when his shooting was at max value. And then he goes back this season, goes back to the bench. And let's be clear, he still shot 37% from three. People treat him like he was super inefficient. Like he's a good 3-point shooter still. And he was, off the catch specifically, very good. Like Shwin said, you put him with another ball handler, you put him with other advantage creators. That's where he shines. But I do think there is more meat on the bone for Deuce in terms of can the Knicks do more to get him more in rhythm and get his shot more consistent?
All right, we're going to move on from Deuce McBride. I want to finish with this. The Knicks have a game. They play tomorrow, game 2. Adjustments will be made. What do you see as, forget what the Celtics are going to do. I think they have adjustments they can make, but we're not going to talk about the Celtics. What would you look at if you're the Knicks? And, obviously you won the game. You can feel good about that. Didn't play a perfect game. What do you think they can do? Or what do you think they can clean up that will help them potentially steal another game in Boston? I mean, the main one for me, and I know this is like very niche, but since rebounding is like my favorite thing in the entire world, I think that one for me, we saw Indiana do this last year in the playoffs. I think you saw Detroit do it in the first round, and I think Boston's doing the same. Jalen Brunson's man is going to crash the offensive glass. He is going to crash the offensive glass. Asar did it when they'd have Brunson rotate over to him. Drew Holiday got a few offensive rebounds yesterday. They're like these long rebounds, and this is really on Brunson more than anything like schematic, and maybe other guys need to be attuned to it, but he's got to do a better job boxing out because his man is crashing the glass constantly. I mean, there was a game against Indiana last year in the playoffs where I think Nesmith had like 4 offensive rebounds all on Brunson. But he's got to do a better job there. And I think in general, look, if a team's going to take fucking 53s at minimum, which we know Boston's going to do, you have to be cognizant of the potential for long rebounds. I think, yes, you want to I understand they want to play fast and they want to, get out and transition and leak out and stuff. They've got to be a little bit more judicious about that. And they got to understand when they can do that and when they need to kind of help gang rebound, because there were way too many rebounds that came out to the free throw line area and whatever that Boston was able to beat us to. And, for all the
Isn't
stuff
that part of their strategy with kind of the long threes and all that though? Like
It's a Spo thing. Spo introduced it to the league, and Boston has adopted it. Every smart team knows that the most likely result of a missed three is it lands around the free throw line.
Right.
So if you watch, and Josh Hart does this. Josh Hart's the only Knick who does it naturally. If you watch the smart players and the smart teams, when a three goes up, they actually don't crash the glass. They angle their crash towards the free throw line. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think they need to be smarter about that as a group. I do think Brunson needs to do a better job boxing out. And look, we can stand and talk about, oh man, Celtics got lucky, or the Knicks got lucky, because the Celtics only shot 25% on 63s, whatever they attempted. But I think I would guess that at least 10 of those threes were the result of offensive rebound, spray right back out to a shooter. Probably more than that. If the Knicks can clean that up, and if they can control the glass, they did not control the glass in this game. If they can control the glass, do a better job of keeping the Celtics off the glass, they will have a great chance at stealing another game in game 2. Because for as much as, Boston's going to shoot better, well, can you cut down the possessions they got? Because they got a lot of extra possessions. And the sneaky thing is, with all the stuff people talk about with Boston and, their switchability and 5-out and all this stuff, one of their great superpowers as a team is, despite playing, 2 guards and 2 wings and a big man who often, in the case of Porzingis or Horford, is spaced out beyond the arc, they are a very, very good rebounding team. They're a very good rebounding team. So if the Knicks, and they did this in the game we played, the final game of the regular season that we played, or the final matchup in the regular season we had against Boston, the Knicks did control the glass in that game, and they should have won that game. Very frustrating the way they lost it. But the point being is, we know they can out-rebound Boston, but it has to be a group thing. It's not just going to be Josh Hart standing on his head getting 15 rebounds, or Mitchell Robinson individually doing it. They've got to do it as a group. And that's something that they, again, literally all of them need to be more focused on. I have a little bit more kind of leeway for somebody like OG or even Mikal, who have significant on-ball defensive responsibilities. But they're going to need to do it as a group for sure.
The thing you brought up about how a lot of their missed threes came on the same possession is really interesting to me. I've always thought that, really weird analogy, I've always thought that in tennis, your break point should collapse into 1 if you get the break, because you see these lopsided break point totals, and it's okay, well, how many of those came in the game that the person ended up breaking anyway? And I feel like it's a misleading data point in tennis sometimes. And I feel like, to your point, that skewed Boston's 3-point attempts, where there were possessions where they got a couple offensive rebounds and ended up hitting the 3 anyways. I think you make a great point. That's not one that I would have thought of, so I'm glad you brought it up. To me, the main focus point for the Knicks needs to be Karl Anthony Towns. And I continue to believe that he's the X factor in this series in a way that even Jalen Brunson isn't. I think Jalen Brunson is actually pretty static and right. He's pretty guaranteed production almost. And a lot of it, I think that Boston is weirdly willing to live with. I don't mean that disrespectfully to Brunson. I think that the best thing Brunson can do to force an adjustment in how Boston will treat him and how they'll treat the Knicks is if Brunson starts hitting a bunch of pull-up threes. But he passed on a few of those, and especially in the first half. He ended up taking 9. I loved his approach in the second half more. But as long as he's willing to pass on these pull-up threes and sort of probe and shoot these 2s, and he's not, either breaking them from beyond the arc himself or spraying it around the way maybe some other point guards do, I do think that Boston is willing to live with that. I think Towns is the one who can break their strategy and can break their scheme if the Knicks properly leverage his spacing and his size advantage, because they want to stick wings on him. They want to, be able to put their center on Josh Hart and leave him around the the paint so that the rest of the Knicks offense is affected negatively. And I think that Towns has the capacity to affect that, whether it's hitting a bunch of threes over a guy, whether it's getting the ball on the block and winning those matchups and scoring against the mismatches. I don't know what it is, but I think Towns can do that in a way that Brunson can't. So I think the Knicks in this game that, as we said earlier, is a little bit of house money, I think it would behoove them to make a point of featuring Towns early in the game and getting him going and getting him in rhythm for the series.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I was like, you actually took mine. I was going to highlight Towns. I 100% agree. And I think also you see other compounding effects when you don't get him involved. And when you don't get him involved in the right way. This is a guy, we saw it in Detroit game 4, I think. He has these stretches where he goes on tilt, right? Where he gets the ball at the top of the key. They're being physical. He's not getting a foul. And he keeps running he's like Jim Harbaugh running the ball 45 times to prove or it's that Harbaugh's better. Marty Schottenheimer, right?
No, Ryan Day, right? Just run the ball to prove a point.
Yeah, show you're tough, right? And yeah, you're getting fouled. They're not calling it. Do something else, right? But you get him the ball in the block. You get him the ball, kind of spaced out with an easy catch and shoot read. Get him the ball at the top of the key. Get him those looks early. I also think to that point and kind of how this is not so much an adjustment as a continuation. Pace is everything for this team. Offensive pace. It's not a very new or original point, but that was to me like one of the biggest when they look good against Detroit, when they've looked good in general, right? And that's the whole Thibs era. I think that was a big thing for Julius Randle, right? The games where he really looked good, you see him get down the floor, get deep position. The difference between 10 feet and 16 feet getting the ball there for Julius Randle was everything, or 18 feet, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing, right? Can Cat get down the floor early, establish deep position, get you an efficient post up? Because when he's down there, he's very tough. Can Brunson get the ball up by 18, 19 seconds so that now maybe you get a cross switch? Maybe when you run your first action and it doesn't work, you have time for another one. Maybe if your first action ends up with OG in the corner, it's not him. That's the last thing. OG had a great game. That guy has way too many fucking air balls and drives to the rim that just go nowhere. Just like some of it is a little bit of self-awareness on his point, but sometimes he just gets the ball late in the shot clock and he's not like an improviser. I think pace, and I think when I say pace, it's not that the Knicks don't play fast, but I think the most frustrating part of the Detroit series was they would go 100 miles per hour, throw a home run pass to a guy who's not equipped to catch it, throw up a bad layup, run into numbers or a set defense and not pull it back, or they would walk the ball up the floor, right? That middle ground, right? Get the ball up 17, 18, 19 seconds, 20 seconds. And then, you can do multiple things. You can make them work for the whole possession. You can get the matchups you want. And if it doesn't work, you have multiple bites at the apple. It's something they did a great job of. And that was a big part of why I was still kind of encouraged even after that first half. Not necessarily about them winning, but the process. That's the thing I would highlight most.
With Cat, I don't mind them posting him. Do a better job of getting in post position. He actually had a couple in the first half that were good. One of them, and I'm very curious about this. I think he tends to get better post position when he's on the floor with Mitch than he does in the starting lineup, which is interesting to me. Probably has to do with the center kind of, he can't just leave Mitch in the dunker spot because Mitch is an insane offensive rebounding threat. But when you go back and watch the start of that third quarter, they ran 5 straight possessions for Cat. I swear 3 of them were fucking these ridiculously shitty post-up looks. One of them, no joke, they ran the most telegraphed staggers. He gets no separation. He catches the ball basically behind the 3-point line with his back to the basket on the wing with Tatum right on him. And look, there's a lot of stuff that Cat has to do better himself too, so I'm not going to divorce his responsibility from this. But if you're going to post him, get him better position. And that has to happen schematically. It has to happen from his teammates too. Set better screens.
But I also think
they're not calling moving screens. They're not calling moving screens. Fucking like lean into the fucking guy. Because I had to watch an entire series of Dennis Schroeder and Tim Hardaway Jr. like fucking getting ready for Detroit Lions training camp. I had to watch Peyton Pritchard yesterday like be like a pulling guard throughout the second half of the game or whatever. Like you can set moving screens, do a better job of that, but he has to get better position. And then the other thing he's got to do, and I'm sorry, this is just on him, see the fucking floor, man. See the fucking floor. Like that pass that he just did not make to OG was ridiculous. That was absolutely ridiculous. He throws it to Mikal, who's flashing to the free throw line for the intent, like the express purpose of drawing the defense to him. He drew Derek White to him. He opens up the pass to the fucking opposite corner to OG, who is the hottest guy on the floor. You've got to see the floor. He's got to see the floor better. And I'm sorry, he's also just got to make the passes quicker. And we know he's capable of it. He's a skilled passer. We know we've seen him make a number of passes, just easy kickouts to shooters. Yeah, but he's got to do it. And Julius Randle had the same issue, right? And the issue is, in some ways, you want to make the home run and not just take the single. Like, you don't need to get the assist. You don't need to. Like, you can swing it out to the open guy, force rotation, swing, you get a good shot, whatever it is. You don't need to make the home run pass on every play. You can just make the simple one. He's got to be better about that, and the Knicks have to do a better job of putting him in positions. And also, like, when you do get opportunities to catch and shoot threes, please just take them sometimes. I don't need to see, like, I don't need the pump fake and drive every 55, every 5 seconds. I don't need the jab step, then I'll take the shot. Like, just take the shot. You're a 7-footer that is a fucking 40% plus 3-point shooter for your career. Please trust yourself as a shooter.
I do want to just quickly add, sorry.
No, you're good.
I do want to quickly say, like, in terms of, like, the play you mentioned, right, like, kind of a half-hearted stagger, setting good screens. I think they tend to, like, when the Knicks run half-hearted actions and they don't get to their spots, it's not, part of that is running with a purpose, right? So I think that kind of, when you have the urgency to get into the offense, this is very much a feelings ball thing, but I do think they tend to do a better job of those details when they get the, like, it's not, let's walk into it, let's ease into the set. It is, there's an urgency, right? So I think that also goes back to the pace thing. But sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was going to start by saying Towns taking, I don't care if he was in foul trouble, taking 1-3 in the whole game is preposterous. But I really wanted to emphasize part of the monologue that Shwin just gave, because I truthfully thought it was brilliant. If somebody asked me what the primary difference between the Knicks and Celtics is, like the way they run offense, I would answer almost exactly what Shwin said about making the easy pass and not being obsessed with getting the assist. We actually discussed this on the pregame insofar XJ sort of, I don't know if he was trying to team me up or if he just knew I would have a good answer, but he was like, Tatum, why is Brunson seen as less of a team elevator than a guy like Tatum when Tatum actually has a higher usage and a lower assist percentage? And my answer was Tatum, he was like, what are those two numbers? What are they missing? And my answer was that Tatum's getting no credit from those numbers for hockey assists. When Tatum draws 2 to the ball in the paint on his drives, he doesn't Julius it. He doesn't leap in the air, try to manipulate defenders, and try to set up a 3. He finds the open guy knowing that his teammates will find an open 3. And if you watch the Celtics, how many times do you see Tatum or White or Brown or what was Holiday gets that offensive rebound or whatever it was? Maybe it wasn't an offensive rebound. Holiday drives late in the game last night. Mikal thinks his back is turned to the guy on the perimeter.
Yeah.
So he digs down and Holiday easily finds the kick out. They are just so good at making that extra pass, knowing that somebody will eventually find the shooter in a way that the Knicks just aren't. You don't get nearly as many of those tic-tac-toe possessions from the Knicks in terms of somebody creates an advantage, somebody draws 2, and then kick out and then swing around the perimeter to the right shooter. Those very, very infrequently happen relative to the Celtics. And to Schwin's point, They need to happen, especially when you're Karl Anthony Towns and you are a walking mismatch forcer. Like that is what you can be. He needs to have better and quicker awareness and not to make the assist to set somebody else to make the assist. That needs to be a part of the incentive and needs to be a part of what he does.
Yeah. And one thing, I don't think they need to do this better. I think they just need to stick with it. One thing, Tatum, you talked like we and Stacey have talked about this multiple times, but Stacey mentioned earlier about how like Tatum, this is the best season of his career and he's elevated this year. One of the things that I think he's very clearly superior at right now, I mean, he's become like one of the great wing playmakers in the league. And the great thing about switching more is he doesn't get what he likes to do is he likes to hunt for passes for threes. He likes to swing it, find 3-point shooter, kick it around along the perimeter. The more they switch, the less that becomes available to him. And if you take away that kind of the almost foundation of his playmaking, you're going to help slow them down. You're never going to totally slow them down. You're never going to totally shut down their offense. But you can slow them down. And I think the more they switch, the more they're going to get that benefit. And the more they take away from one piece of Tatum's game that has elevated and a big reason why he's having the best year of his career.
It's such a good point because to what I just said about why this is an advantage Tatum has in a vacuum over Brunson, the Knicks have basically been like, okay, well, we're actually just going to switch so you don't have that advantage. And now all of a sudden, Boston's going to say, okay, well, we can switch too, to the point where the Knicks are like, yeah, Brunson's probably just still going to do similar stuff. It's a one-on-one competition. That is something Brunson's better than Jason Tatum at, is creating points for your team, high floor points for your team consistently. When there aren't those high ceiling options, kickouts to corner threes or hockey assists that set up corner threes. If you take those options away from both teams, the Celtics go further down than the Knicks do. The Knicks actually don't change that much. So that's another good call by you, Shwin. And it's honestly a brilliant tactical decision in game one by the Knicks.
Yeah, I think it was a really good call, and they just got to stick with it because it takes away so much of what Boston wants to do. Stacey, I don't know if you had anything more. I think we've gone for 2 hours here, so I was gonna call it here. Jeff, thank you so much for jumping on with us. Let people know where they can find you and plug anything that you'd like to plug. Maybe even an article you wrote recently.
Yeah, I did write an article for Strickland recently. That was super popular. Thanks,
especially with
Alex
Celtics fans.
Yeah, they loved it. They definitely, yeah. I get it though. I get Jaylen Brown's a homegrown star who won a Finals MVP. They're probably, I'm sure we'd be protective of someone like that too if we had that opportunity. But I did write an article for Strickland. I've been putting more clips up on Strickland, and yeah, I mean XJ and I, if you like the way talk about basketball, it's sort of just how we talk about basketball. We are data driven. We use film and we discuss sort of more macro theories, tactics, strategy, and stuff over at Hot Hand Theory. So if you like us, we cover the whole NBA. So come check us out. And I appreciate you guys for having me on.
Absolutely. Stacey, anything you'd like to plug before you get out of here?
Jeff, that's a sick poster, by the way, behind you,
Yeah.
But it has, I believe, a green uniform of a certain.
Yeah, it's like a preview of the '85 finals.
So the Celtics won that. That's bad TV.
No, they lost.
The
Lakers
lost
in '84. They won, right?
Yeah.
They won 84. They lost 85. They lost 87.
Okay, then you're doing the right thing.
And they won 86 too, but not against the Lakers. But yeah, it's a preview of those finals. It's got like Bird and Magic and Kareem and all the great players from that. So yeah, I wanted something. My dad's friend said I looked like a hostage negotiator with just the blank wall behind me. So he advised me to put something, and my mom for Christmas or something got me this nice piece of art to put behind me on the wall. So
well, I'm sure people look like feel like I'm on the other side of that negotiation because of the beard. But I will also plug the Hot Hand Theory. Jeff and XJ do a lot of good work. I think it's always very interesting, even when you don't agree. Their perspectives are very well dug. They do the work, which I think no one's gonna. I think that those are always the best people I like to follow. I'll plug all the great work at the Strickland. Check out the Game 2 recap. It's going to be written by a very handsome, intelligent young man. So, definitely check out the Game 2 recap. Win or lose.
I have nothing to plug. I will plug the Hot Hand Theory. I'll plug all the work at the Strickland. Check it out. Jeff wrote a good article. Khan's recap of Game 1 is excellent. So check that out. That is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great evening. I hope that the Knicks win Game 2. By the way, we just got an update. Celtics say Sam Hauser is doubtful for Game 2. And Kristaps Porzingis is probable. So there's that. All right. That is our show for today. Hope everybody has a great week. Hopefully the Knicks win Game 2, and we can celebrate a 2-0 lead over the dastardly, disgusting Celtics. Until then, peace.